Want to know more about imposter syndrome? Make sure you watch part 1. This is part 2. Hi there, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Saira, the show where I answer your questions about personal growth, mental health, and relationships. Today is actually part 2 of a 2-part series on imposter syndrome. So if you haven't seen part 1, stop the video, go back and watch it, come back, because it might not make sense if you don't, but it's up to you. So today we're talking about the first video. We talked about like what is imposter syndrome and what are the different types of imposter syndrome we might experience. And then today we're talking about how to deal with it, what to do about it if you have imposter syndrome. Okay, so how do we deal with it? Okay, I think the first thing you have to do is explore your type, right? What are the parts that are coming up with imposter syndrome? Because sometimes concepts like imposter syndrome are like huge. And you're just like, how do I even talk about that? I know Brene Brown has a video where she talks about trust. And it's like, what a concept. It's a huge concept. So she breaks it down into like 8 different things that have to do with trust. So in the same way, Dr. Valerie Young has broken down imposter syndrome into these 5 different types. And so that's the first thing, is figure out what type you are. And it might be interesting as you figure out your type to link that to other areas of your life, right? So if you're like the perfectionist type, is that something that shows up only at work? Or does it also show up, in your home life? Does it show up if you're, a homemaker? Does it show up in your cleaning? Like what's happening here with the perfectionism? And is it like in more than one area? And in one particular area, you're feeling that imposter syndrome? Just something to think about. So that's the first one I would think, is exploring your type. The other thing is it's a 2-part response, okay? So there's things that are about the external world that we can do about it, and then there's things about our internal world that we can do about it. So I'm going to go through each of these ideas kind of slowly and deliberately so that you can get a sense of how do you deal with it? Because there's lots of different like tools and tips, and like I'm sure you could like Google how do I deal with imposter syndrome, and you'll get like pages and pages of stuff. But I've kind of distilled it down to 7 different ideas that can help. So 4 have to do with the external environment and 3 have to do with our internal environment. So I'll start with the external. First, and the most obvious, talk about it. Talk about it. That could be with friends, that could be with family, that could be with a therapist, that could be in group support. Talk about feeling like an imposter and what impact that's having on you. Now, when you're choosing to talk to someone about things, be discerning. Choose who you want to talk to. Don't just like talk to people who you know aren't going to get it and going to make you feel bad. Like those are the wrong people. But those people who know you and they know your standards and they know your capacity, those are the people to say, I'm really feeling like a fraud and when it comes to XYZ. So that's the first thing. And the reason you talk to people is because it's important sometimes to get that external perspective, because we can make a whole story in our head about something, but unless you're checking it out with other people, it's a story in your head, right? And so talking to people can help us check. Is there something here that I need to be worried about? Like, am I a fraud? Like maybe I am a fraud and that's why I'm feeling like a fraud. And so that talking it out with someone is really important. And then we have another idea, which is actually helping other people who are having imposter syndrome. And it's really, really incredibly powerful when you actually help someone else. And that might be someone who you're mentoring. That might be somebody who's a peer of yours or a colleague of yours, but they're feeling that imposter syndrome. When you're able to support them in going through that, it's like you hear yourself giving really good advice that you should be taking yourself. You know what I mean? So I have the privilege of teaching counselors in training at a master's program. And the imposter syndrome comes up all the time. Like every class I teach, somebody talks about imposter syndrome. And it's a real thing, right? When you're learning a new skill, it's really normal to feel like a fraud because you're testing out these things that are not natural to you. But helping them through that hurdle and that like starting to build an identity as a therapist reinforces my identity as a supervisor and a teacher, right? So if I'm feeling like a fraud as a teacher, for example, me helping them through their fraud helps me not feel like a fraud. It's I don't know why it works that way, but it really does. Again, that requires something outside of yourself, right? So helping someone. Now, I really wanted to talk about these external pieces because a lot of self-help kind of personal growth work is very internally and individually focused. And I think that's a problem. I think that's problematic because it doesn't allow us to like think about the actual context in which we live. Most of us live in some sort of a context where we interact with other people. It could be as simple as, seeing other people at the grocery store. Maybe you never talk to them, but you have to interact with them. It could be like, you're going to see, unless you're one of those people who's like away on a forest, but then you probably don't have internet. You're probably not watching this video, right? So those of us watching this video likely have to interact with others. And if we're just talking about like my wellness and my inner peace and my sanctuary, then you miss the opportunities that come with social interaction. You miss the richness that comes when you step outside of yourself and connect to somebody else. One of my teachers says, when you're feeling at your worst, look up and see if there's someone you can help. When you're feeling at your worst, look up and see if there's someone you can help, because your focus just shifts, right? It shifts from this bad, awful feeling to, oh, is there some service? Could I be of service? And now I'm not like, okay, I also understand that many of our viewers either have mental illness is in your family somewhere. So I'm not talking about people like who are clinically depressed, okay? But just when you're feeling down, if you step up and you help someone, you shift, right? You shift your awareness. So that will help get you out of your own head and into into service of others. The third one has to do with the external in a different sort of way. So in the third one, it's stop comparing yourself to others. Just stop comparing yourself to others. Just stop it. We all have different skills. We all have different strengths, different gifts. We all have different flaws. We all have different shortcomings and areas to grow and work on. There's nobody else out there exactly like you. And you'll always find someone who's got it better, and you'll always find someone who's got it worse if you look for it, right? So when we compare ourselves to other people, we say, okay, I want to be like this and I don't want to be like this. And so you're either looking up at people or you're looking down at people. And that can create really severe imposter syndrome either way. So one of the things I would encourage you to consider is finding ways to look across at people, starting to see the sameness between you and other people. What that does is it takes away any sort of like competition, right? And it's hard because a lot of our culture and our society is based on competition. Like we're rewarded for being the first or the best or the winner, right? But the most of us are not the first or the best or the winner. The rest of us are the 99 other people who didn't get the first place trophy, right? So it's okay to be the same and not actually always have to stand out and be better and be better and be better. Really important. Oh, and the other side too, right? Is like, yeah, you might be the last, but you're not going to be the last every single time, right? So also not putting yourself so low that you can't actually feel valuable or valued. So find opportunities where, and think about who you surround yourself with. Are those people who you look across at, or are those people you look up to, or are those people that you look down at, right? Just get curious about that. So those are my thoughts for today. Hopefully that was helpful in our 2-part series of imposter syndrome. If you have a question, make sure to email me and I will see you next time. Bye.